Cool. Well, it is 35 past, so if anybody's coming, we got quite a healthy amount of people here anyway. So thank you all for coming along, and thanks for joining us at the Redgate UX Meetup, which is part of Redgate's kind of we call it Ingeniously Simple, which is our sort of community kind of brand thing. If you want to tag us in or anything like that, or tweet anything that you hear about today, we're UX Redgate on Twitter. So yeah, feel free to share any of the cool ideas that you find or anything like that on there. I've only got a couple of slides, but really just to cover what we're here for. Some of you will have heard this numerous times before. People like Hazel, you've been to most of them, I think, so apologies. But for anybody who hasn't been before, because we have got quite a few new people, so thanks again for your interest coming. Basically, we've set this up. Obviously, Redgate takes a lot from the community, and this is, I guess, one of our efforts to give something back by hosting speakers and sharing knowledge and things like that. So we do these each month. This is a bit of a special one given Teresa's schedule, but in general we do them monthly, and really they're for anybody. We cover everything from user experience, product design, research, strategy, all sorts of things. We've had marketing talks, we've had all kinds of things from all different levels. We're firmly believers in sharing knowledge at whatever level you're at. So we've previously had people fresh out of university giving a talk about their experiences, and then today we've got people like Teresa, who's an established expert in her field, sort of thing. So so it's just, this is our effort to try and give something back. It's very friendly and very chilled out, obviously, and yeah, just I hope you have a good time, really. We are super, if my mouse works, which it doesn't seem to. Oh, it's gone too far. Of course it has. We are super lucky today to have Teresa talk to us. She's a renowned author, speaker, consultant, coach, all sorts. So it's a real great honor to have her with us today. And we were just talking just before we let you guys in, and she's certainly like one of the people that I personally I'm a bit of a fanboy of, I guess, if you want to call it that. The way she speaks and the way the content that she delivers on her website and stuff like that is really useful. So it's true honor to have you here, Teresa. Thank you so much. You're here to hear Teresa talk. I always do this. I go off on a ramble. So I will just pass you over to the person that you've come and listened to rather than me. So if we could put a virtual hand together to have Teresa talk to us about the what and the why of continuous discovery, I'll stop sharing and pass it over to you, Teresa.
Excellent. Let's see. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's always fun, especially I do a lot of speaking at product meetups. It's super fun to get to speak at a design-oriented meetup. So we're going to talk today about the what and why of continuous discovery. I know for designers in particular, this can be a really important topic because I meet a lot of designers that say, wait, what does my role look like when everybody on the team are doing things that maybe historically we've put in the design bucket. So we'll definitely get into that a little bit today. So one of the things I like to share at the beginning of this talk is that I have had the luxury of working with teams all over the world. I've worked with startups that are as small as 2 founders just getting started, all the way up to multinational companies with hundreds of thousands of employees in a wide variety of industries. And the reason why I like to share that at the beginning of the talk is because I know what it's like to sit in the audience and to have a little bit of skepticism and think this is great. I know how this could work at an Amazon or a Google or a Facebook, but how in the world is this going to work at my company? And so one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to just think about the tools and frameworks and methods that we're going to talk about have really been developed and refined in a lot of different contexts. So I want to encourage you to think about how might I bring this to my organization? And I'll give you a lot of ways you can think about just an easy first step, depending on what things currently look like at your company. Okay, so we're going to start at the very beginning and really just talk about what do we mean by discovery at all? And for every product team, and I will share, since I'm talking to an audience of designers, that when I talk about product teams, I really mean product managers, designers, software engineers, user researchers, anybody who's part of the team that is building a digital product. That's really important here, because when I say product people, I mean it very broadly and not just product managers. We're all doing both discovery and delivery. Discovery is simply the work we're doing to decide what to build, whereas delivery is what we're doing to build, ship, and maintain a production quality product. Everybody's doing both. As some companies, our business stakeholders are making the discovery decisions and handing them to a delivery team. As some companies, a feature team is maybe deciding what features to put on their roadmap, and it's a very output-focused way of doing discovery. What we're seeing as an industry is we're evolving towards an outcome-focused, customer-centric way of doing discovery. So a more modern discovery process looks like the customer is included in the process. We're starting with outcomes, with the impact we're trying to have, and we're recognizing that we may not be able to make all the decisions on our own and really get to good products. Now, most of us, discovery is becoming a pretty trendy topic. We've probably heard some things around it. The thing that I really want to talk about today is that a lot of our discovery activities and a lot of discovery practices are being influenced from a project mindset. And what I want to talk about today is how do we shift more to a continuous mindset. And I think this is particularly important for designers because a lot of our design practices were heavily influenced over the last 20 years by external design agencies. And when you're external, you sell projects because you're not working alongside a team week over week. And as we've seen design come internal and be embedded with teams, we need to start changing the way that we think about our work so that it's much more continuous. So let me give an example of this. What does project-based discovery look like? At a lot of companies, we do annual planning where we resource projects. We pick the projects and initiatives we're going to work on over the year. We assign teams to them. We give them roadmaps. Maybe at the beginning of a project or initiative, we do some customer research. We interview a dozen customers. We create a research deck. Maybe we create some personas. Over the course of the project, we make a bunch of decisions and we base it on what we learned during that research. And then maybe once we're done with all the design work, before we're ready to hand it to engineers, we do some validation research. We usability test it. Maybe at the end of delivery, we A/B test it and measure the impact. That's very project-based because there's clear stages at which we're getting feedback from the customer. Maybe at the beginning, maybe at the end of the design, maybe at the end of delivery. The challenge we're seeing with this is that products, digital products, don't have an end, right? A project has an end. Digital products rarely have an end. We're always iterating, we're constantly improving. This is why we're seeing on the delivery side a shift towards a more continuous mindset, and we're starting to see the same shift on the discovery side. So I want to start with a really clear definition of continuous discovery. And the reason why I think this is important is a lot of you are probably already adopting good discovery activities on a regular basis, but you may be adopting them from a project mindset. So I define continuous discovery as at a minimum weekly touch points with customers by the team that's building the product, where they're conducting small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. Now, there's a lot in this definition. Over the course of the talk, we're actually going to break it down and get into it line by line. So I want to start with this first one. I think it's really critical for adopting a continuous mindset to be engaging with customers week over week. How do we keep a continuous feedback loop with our customers? And the reason for this is that as product people, we're making product decisions every day. Some of them are big strategic decisions, like what should go on our roadmap, what outcomes are we driving, which customers are we serving. Some of them are small and medium-sized decisions, like what do we label this button? How do we expose this feature in the interface? How should the underlying data model work? Most of us know to do some research on those big strategic decisions, but we sometimes forget that our smaller decisions, our medium-sized decisions can also benefit from continuous feedback. And because we're making decisions every day, I really want to see teams engaging with customers at least every week. And the reason for this is if you only talk to a customer once a month or once a quarter at the beginning of a big project, it means you're making a month or a quarter worth of decisions without getting customer feedback. And the problem with this is that product teams suffer from a bias called the curse of knowledge. So the curse of knowledge is a bias that basically says we can't remember what it was like before we had the knowledge we have. So product teams have knowledge, expert knowledge on our product, how it works, how the data model works, how the interface works, where everything is at. And as we make daily decisions, we're making them from our perspective, and we forget what it's like to have the customer's perspective, where they don't have the same depth of knowledge that we have about our product. So when we engage with our customers every week, we're reminding ourselves, we're exposing that gap between how we think about the product and how our customers think about the product. Now, for those of you that are used to doing project-based research, this cadence might be a little bit scary because you're not always going to be ready with pixel perfect design. You're not always going to have a perfect discussion guide every week for what you're going to go through with a customer. And this is actually a good thing. We want to engage with our customers when we have half-baked ideas. We want to engage with our customers when we have pencil drawings. And the reason for this is that when we get feedback earlier in the process, we start to adopt what I call a co-creation mindset. This is where we're really engaging with customers from the beginning so that we can act on their feedback. When we have a validation mindset, we've done all the design work and then we validate, did we get it right? If we uncover a significant problem, it's hard to make big changes because we have engineers waiting, right? If you A/B test something and it doesn't work, you just built a whole bunch of stuff before you found out it didn't work. Co-creation mindset says, let's get feedback from customers much earlier. Let's actually invite them to create with us. Now, whenever I talk about this, somebody in the audience is thinking of one of two quotes. The first is Steve Jobs saying customers don't know what they want until we show it to them. I believe Jeff Bezos said something similar. The second is the Henry Ford quote where he might have said, if I had asked customers what they would have wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So I want to be really clear when I talk about a co-creation mindset. I'm not talking about going to customers and saying, what should we build? What we're doing when we co-create with customers is we're taking their knowledge of their own context, their needs, their pain points, their goals, and we're combining it with our knowledge of technology and design expertise and what's possible and co-creating solutions together. So this doesn't look like, hey, customer, what should I build? We're just going to go build feature requests. It's more nuanced than that. And we'll talk about what those nuances are in just a second. So this first line, this goal of adopting a continuous cadence. Our goal is to infuse more of our decisions with customer feedback so we overcome that curse of knowledge. Now, if you're doing project-based research and you're only talking to customers at the beginning of a quarter when you get a new outcome or at the beginning of a project, I don't want this to feel overwhelming to you. You can take a continuous improvement mindset to this. If you're only engaging with customers quarterly, try to get to monthly. If you're already engaging with them monthly, try to get to every other week. So look at how do you make next week a little bit better than last week and iterate your way there to a more frequent cadence. This is going to help to unlock that co-creation mindset. So let's get into this next line. And this is particularly important, I think, for designers. So we're engaging with customers every week. Who's participating in those customer engagements? And I think it's really critical that we take a cross-functional approach to this. So it starts with this idea of a product trio, the product manager, a designer, and a software engineer being jointly responsible for discovery decisions. So working together from the beginning to decide what to build. And therefore, they're the ones engaging customers together. Now, this is different from what we've historically done. Oftentimes, we've let the product manager or the designer be the voice of the customer. What's wrong with this? If the designer is the only person who interviews customers and they're bringing the knowledge back to the team, we're letting that designer have expertise that other people on the team don't have. When it comes time to make decisions, it's not going to be truly collaborative because the trump card in any decision is I talk to a customer, this is what they want. Nobody has a rebuttal to that. So the goal is we want all three roles doing research together. We want them having firsthand exposure to the customer so that when it comes time to make critical decisions, these three roles have equal footing. This is really important because we know that good digital products need to be viable. That's the lens the product manager is bringing. They need to be usable. That's the lens that our designers are typically bringing. They need to be feasible. That's the lens our engineers are typically bringing. And all three are responsible for understanding the customer. So we're building something desirable. Now, most of you have more than these three roles on your team. You might have additional engineers, depending on your DevOps strategy. You might have some QA folks. We might have some user researchers in the room wondering what their role is. You might have customer success folks, data analysts, data scientists. This list could be infinite. I've heard from UX writers, project managers, scrum masters. Add your favorite role. I'm not trying to leave anybody out here. Here's the idea. The product trio leads discovery. It doesn't mean other people aren't involved. It just means they're the leadership team that is driving discovery decisions. Depending on the type of decision that you're making, you might invite other roles to participate. So if you're working on the discovery for your go-to-market strategy, you better invite your product marketing manager to those conversations. If you're working on your underlying data model or what analytics you're going to track, you're probably going to invite that data analyst to be part of those decisions. Now, depending on your product, if you're working on a data-heavy product, this concept can flex. You might have a quad. Instead of having a trio, you might say we need our data scientist in all of our decisions. If you have the luxury of having a user researcher embedded on your team, you probably want them involved in all of your interviews and all of your assumption tests because they're going to help you do better research. So this concept can flex, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find the smallest cross-functional role team that represents the right roles for any given decision that we're trying to make. And the reason why we want it to be the smallest team is that's what's going to allow us to move quickly, right? The more people involved in any decision, the slower we're going to go. We're not trying to exclude specific expertise. We're going to consult different people based on the decision that we're making, but this gives us a model where we have true cross-functional collaboration and we can still move quickly. So we want to see this trio engaging with customers every week. This is the first half of our definition. I want to get into the second half. This is really the meat of the talk. So our trio is engaging with customers week over week. Their goal is to conduct small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. Both these lines work together. We can't take big project size research and try to do it week over week. It's not sustainable. We have to change our research activities to be smaller. And we can't do research for research's sake. I see this a lot at really design-minded companies. We spend forever creating experience maps and persona documents and doing amazing research. And we forget that actually our job is to drive an outcome and to create value for the customer in a way that creates value for the business, because that's what allows us to pay the bills and allows us to continue to serve the customer over time. So we're going to get into how this works. I like to use this visual. It's called an opportunity solution tree. I created it to help a team chart the best path to their desired outcome. So let's talk about outcomes. I like to see a trio start with what's the outcome we're trying to derive. This is different from what we've historically done. We've historically started with outputs on a roadmap. We said we need to build these solutions. That assumes that we can predict the future, right? If we have a 12-month roadmap, it assumes we know 9 months from now what we should be building. If we have a quarter roadmap, it assumes 6 weeks from now we know what we should be building. If the whole world got a dose of anything in 2020, it's just how uncertain and unpredictable the future is. And a big part of the continuous mindset is shifting from an output mindset to an outcome mindset. An outcome mindset says, we're not really sure what we should be building next month, 6 weeks from now, 3 months from now, 9 months from now. But we know we need to create this value. And we can look at value from both a business value lens and a customer value lens. And a lot of this gets encapsulated in our outcome. So the business value side, your leaders are probably going to communicate what business value your team should create. I'm going to use Netflix as an example, not because they pay me to do so or because I have any affiliation with them, but because people around the world generally are familiar with Netflix. We can imagine that a business leader at Netflix assigns a business outcome to a team of increasing subscriber retention. That's a financial metric. It's how it measures the health of the Netflix business. That's business value. We do need to drive business value. That's how we stay in business long enough to serve our customers over time. But as a product team, we want to translate that to a product outcome. A product outcome is measuring a behavior that happens in the product. So it's something our customer is doing in the product that's getting us closer to customer value. It's also moving us into the span of control of a product team. Product teams influence what happens in the product. Once we have a clear product outcome that we've defined, it's a behavior that happens in the product that drives business value, we want to discover opportunities. Opportunities are customer needs, pain points, and desires. The opportunity space is infinite. We're going to limit ourselves to just the opportunities that have the potential of driving that product outcome and thus that business outcome in turn. This is where we're getting into the meat of customer value. What are the customer needs, pain points, and desires that if we addressed them would create that business value? Now, a lot of UX-minded folks ask me, why is business value at the top of the tree and not customer value? If you do a good job of defining that product outcome, customer value is also at the top of the tree. But the reason why we start with business value is because we can almost always find a way to create customer value that drives business value. The reverse is not always true. There's some big examples of this. Google Reader, ton of customer value. Customers loved that product. Google shut it down. They could not find a way to create enough business value. Most businesses are not here to just be do-gooders, right? Even if they are do-gooders, even our B corporations, even our nonprofits, they still have to survive. They have to pay the bills, right? So we're looking at business value, but we want to do it in a customer-centric way. So opportunities are where we're looking at customer value. We, of course, need to eventually get to outputs. So we need to discover the solutions that would address those opportunities. And we're constraining it. We're trying to address those opportunities in a way that drives our outcome. So this visual is going to help us align all of those things. We're not moving away from outputs entirely. We do have to build and ship something, but we're looking at what outputs create customer value by addressing opportunities and that do so in a way that also create business value. Okay, so when we're defining our outcome, ideally, this is a two-way negotiation between the product leader and the product team. Usually the product leader is going to communicate business outcomes, and we need to do the work to translate it to a product outcome. Once that's in place, we're going to see our trio start to adopt a continuous cadence of customer touch points. One of the two primary activities they're doing is they're conducting interviews. Now, a lot of teams think about interviewing as a way to evaluate solutions. I want you to think about interviewing as a way to discover opportunities. So we're using interviews to map out the opportunity space. This continuous cadence is really important because the opportunity space is always changing. It changes when competitors enter the market. It changes when technology disrupts the market. It changes when external trends like COVID disrupt the world. It changes when we release things because everything that we put in customers' hands has an impact on the opportunity space. So this continuous cadence is really important because the opportunity space is always changing. Now, the biggest barrier for why trios don't interview every week is because recruiting a customer every week takes hustle. And if it takes hustle, you're going to stop doing it. You're going to have a busy week where you just don't find someone to talk to. So if your goal is to unlock this continuous cadence, one of the first things you want to do is automate your recruiting process. I'm going to give you 3 quick tips for how to do this. The first is to recruit your customers while you're using your product or service. This is a really great way to recruit for B2C companies and also recruiting end users for your B2B SaaS companies. Your customers are already using your product, capture their attention, invite them to participate in an interview. In order to get this right, it will take some experimentation. Where do you ask them? How much time do you ask for? How far out do you let them schedule? What's the incentive that you give them? These are all variables that you have to experiment with to get right for your audience. But I would say for 80% of the teams that I work with, this is the method that works best for them. Now, if you're B2B and your customers are not working out of your product or you need to get in front of buyers, you can use customer-facing teams to help you recruit. So what do I mean by this? Salespeople, account managers, customer success teams, support teams. The people in your building who are already on the phone with customers all day, every day. This is who you want to use to help recruit. You can give them triggers. If you talk to a customer that experiences this pain point, ask them if they'll talk to the product team. Same thing, you're going to have to experiment a little bit. Don't ask for too much time, experiment with incentives, but the goal is to use the people that are already talking to your customers to help you recruit. This probably covers the next 18% of teams that I work with. So for 98% of the teams that I work with, they're either recruiting people while they use their product or they're using their customer-facing teams. This final 2%, you either have a teeny tiny addressable market. I worked with a company where their total addressable market was 6 US-based movie studios. Or your customers, their time is very valuable. Now, everybody's time is valuable. I mean, extremes, right? So we're talking Fortune 500 CEOs. We're talking about respiratory ICU physicians and nurses during the height of COVID. Extremely valuable time, right? Extremely limited time. This is where you can think about setting up an ongoing long-term relationship with a subset of your customers. Some people call these design partners. Some people call it a customer advisory board. The idea is that you're finding engaged customers to work with you over time. I want to highlight, I still want you interviewing them one-on-one. To conduct a focus group requires skilled facilitation that most product people don't have. It's much easier to learn how to interview well. So even if you're working with customers over time, you're still interviewing them one-on-one. What this looks like is you might invite 12 customers to do a monthly interview over the course of a year. If you have 3 product teams, every product team now has a customer to talk to every week, even though you have a limited addressable market or you have very busy customers. The risk with this method is that if you have a large market that they're hard to get in touch with and you only talk to a small number of them, you risk building a product that works for a subset and not the whole market. So you need to mix and match this method with one of the other methods. But what I will share for 100% of the teams that I work with, they're automating their recruiting process using a mix of these 3 methods. If you want to learn more, I go in depth about these methods in the book. And then we also have some other resources at the end that I'll share that will help you put these into practice. Once you've automated your recruiting process, we need to get into how do we ask the right questions. The key here is we want to avoid speculation. Now, if you've read anything on the internet about how to interview well, you've probably read avoid leading questions, ask open-ended questions. I'm going to argue this advice is not good enough. If I say, tell me about your experience on Netflix, that's not a leading question. It's open-ended, but it's speculative. Human beings are not very good at summarizing our own behavior. We rarely reflect on what we do or why we do it. And if I ask you a question like, tell me about your experience on Netflix, you're going to speculate about your behavior, and it's not necessarily going to match what you do in reality. It's not because you're trying to be deceptive. It's because we all suffer from cognitive biases. So the way to avoid this is I want you to spend your time interviewing, collecting specific instances about the past. So I'm not going to ask you, tell me about your experience on Netflix. I'm going to ask you, tell me about the last time you watched Netflix. I can play with that question depending on what I'm trying to learn. Tell me about the last time you watched Netflix on the go. Maybe I work on the mobile team. Tell me about the last time you had to search for a specific movie on Netflix. Maybe I work on the search team. Right? So I can play with that story-based question, but I want to keep my interview grounded in a specific instance because that's going to lead to more reliable feedback. It's going to actually match their behavior. It's also going to help me start to see opportunities. When we collect specific instances, needs, pain points, and desires start to emerge. This is going to allow me to map out the opportunity space. Once I've done that, which is a huge topic in and of itself, I'm going to choose a target opportunity. Once we have a problem to solve, I want to work with a set of solutions. This is counterintuitive. A lot of us work with one solution at a time. We find ourselves asking, is this idea good or not? Decision-making researchers call this a whether or not decision. The problem with whether or not decisions is we fall prey to 2 critical biases that come into play. One is called the escalation of commitment. The more we invest in the idea, the more we fall in love with the idea, right? So if I'm a designer and I'm doing all the design work for one idea, the more I spend on that idea, the more I love it, the more I think it's the best solution ever. The more I love an idea, the more a second bias comes into play, which is confirmation bias, which says we're likely to notice the evidence that suggests our idea is great and to miss the evidence that suggests our idea is flawed. So even if you're doing all the right discovery activities, you're testing your assumptions, you're running experiments, you're prototyping, you're getting qualitative feedback, you're still going to run the risk. And people think they can get around this because they interpret it as you're ignoring the negative feedback. I cannot emphasize this enough. You don't even notice the feedback that suggests your idea is flawed. So you can be doing all of the right things and not be getting the data that you need to truly evaluate your ideas. The easiest way around this is to work with sets of solutions. So you're going to compare and contrast solutions against each other, and you're going to ask which of these ideas look best. Designers are exceptionally good at this when we're working on design options. We're less good at this when looking at solutions or looking at opportunities. The more you can infuse compare and contrast thinking, the better decisions you will make because your brain will see the pros and cons of each idea. This is an important enough concept that I like to use a visual for this. This is Usain Bolt. At one time, he was the world's fastest 100-meter runner. If I asked you, is Usain Bolt fast? You should push back on that question. It's a whether or not question. Is he fast or not? It depends on what I'm comparing him to. Is he fast relative to a cheetah? Probably not. Is he fast relative to a Tesla in the first 100 meters? I would love to see that race. Is he fast relative to the other humans? Absolutely. What we're seeing on the right is a clear compare and contrast. When you're evaluating solutions, I want you looking for an obvious front runner. So the way to do that, we're working with a set of solutions that address the same target opportunity. Now, the reason why we don't do this today, we're doing project-based research. We're doing all of the design up front, and then we're usability testing it. We don't have time to do all of the design up front for 3 ideas. Or we're using A/B testing. We're building the idea, and we're A/B testing to measure, did we get it right? We don't have time to A/B test 3 ideas for the same opportunity. In order to get to good compare and contrast decisions, we have to change the way we do research. We have to stop testing our ideas and instead break our ideas down into their underlying assumptions and run fast assumption tests. I'm going to show you how to do this. We're going to stick with our Netflix example. Let's imagine that Netflix interviews a bunch of customers and their target opportunity they hear over and over again is, I want to watch sports. I don't know about Netflix in the UK, but I know for Netflix in the US, 0 sports. Good at TV shows, good at movies, not good at sports, right? So let's imagine that Netflix decides we want to be good at sports. They come up with 3 ways to solve this. So here in the US, a lot of our sports are on our local networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. I don't know if the local networks in the UK show sports. Let's imagine they did. A way to solve this would be to integrate those local channels into Netflix. Second way we could solve this, we could partner with sports leagues directly and integrate the games directly. So here in the US, that might be Major League Baseball or National Hockey League. In the UK, it might be the Premier League, right? We'll partner directly with the Premier League and see if or Euro Cup's going on right now. We'll partner directly with Euro Cup and see if we can get games directly into Netflix. That's the second solution. Third solution might be, we're Netflix, sports are not our strength. Let's partner with someone like Fubo TV that is good at sports. And when you buy a Netflix subscription, we'll bundle a Fubo subscription and vice versa. Okay, we've got 3 different solutions for the same target opportunity. We want to compare and contrast them. We can't build all 3. That would take too long. We can't do the design work for all 3. That would take too long. We want to look at how can we start comparing and contrasting this week. The way to do that is to break them down into their underlying assumptions, and we're going to run rapid assumption tests. What do I mean by assumptions? As product teams, we make desirability assumptions. Does anybody want this? And are they willing to do what we need them to do to get value from the solution? We make viability assumptions. Will this be good for the business? Will it drive our outcome? We make feasibility assumptions. Is it possible? Can we build it? I'm going to add 2 categories to this Venn diagram. One we're pretty good at, usability assumptions. Can people find it? Do they understand it? Are they able to do what we need them to do? The 5th category we're pretty terrible about as a tech industry, and that's ethical assumptions. Is there any potential harm? There's a lot of ways to think about ethical assumptions. One is, what data are we collecting? How are we using it? Do our customers understand that? Are they comfortable with it? Another category is inclusivity. Who are we designing for? Who are we including in those decisions? Who are we leaving out? If we're testing by looking at majorities, which is what we do when we do A/B testing, it worked for the majority. Who did it not work for in the minority? This is why we see a lot of products replicate the social inequities we see in our communities in the products that we're building. So one of the things that we can look at is, how do we surface and test ethical assumptions? Okay, these 5 categories can help you generate assumptions. There's one major problem. Most of us are blind to the assumptions that we're making. If you're suffering from escalation and commitment, you love your idea, there's no potential harm. Of course it's possible. It's hard to see underlying assumptions. So the best way to surface them is to story map our ideas. The yellow boxes here are our story map. This is a very simple story map. I'm going to walk you through it. This is for the integrating local channels. The way we're going to story map is we're going to assume our solution already exists, and we're going to map out, what does this customer have to do to get value from this idea? So in this instance, our customer would have to decide to watch a game. They'd have to choose a streaming service. For Netflix, we want it to be Netflix. They have to open that service. They have to select the local channel. They have to watch the game. I can now go through the story map step by step and say what needs to be true in order for the subscriber to do what we need them to do. So the first step, they need to decide to watch a game. What needs to be true? Our subscribers need to be sports fans, right? They have to want to watch sports. Second step, in order for them to choose Netflix, they have to know that Netflix has sports. They have to want to watch sports on Netflix. Our service has to be available. I'm going to jump to the fourth step. In order for them to get value out of this solution, they have to know what channel the game is on, right? I'm making them choose a channel because we integrated live channel feeds, not individual games. So they have to be able to say, here in the US, Monday Night Football is on ABC. Or I don't know if Premier League's on a local channel, but they would have to know that, right? That's the only way they're going to get value out of this solution. We have to be able to partner with the local channels. So I can go step by step and start to generate assumptions. What's the value of this? Some of our assumptions are shared across all of our ideas. Our subscribers want to watch sports. Our subscribers want to watch sports on our platform. If one of those assumptions is not true, we can throw away the whole set of ideas, which means we don't have to test one idea at a time. The second way assumption testing helps us is some of our assumptions will be unique to each of our ideas. And those are the assumptions that are going to help us collect, compare, and contrast data. So let's walk through this. Why is assumption testing faster? I'm going to give you 3 ways to test the assumption our subscribers want to watch sports. Each one of them I can run in a couple of hours to a day or 2. The first is I can prototype to test my assumption. You're all designers. We all know how to prototype. The difference here, I'm not prototyping a solution. I'm prototyping just enough to test my assumption. So I don't need a real pixel perfect interface prototype. I just need a provocation that tests, do you want to watch sports? So I could put together some options. It doesn't even need to be the Netflix interface. It could include some TV shows, some movies, some sporting events, and I could put it in front of somebody and say, what would you like to watch right now? And if some of my subscribers are sports fans, I would expect some of them to choose a sporting event. What did I do here? I'm not creating pixel perfect designs. I don't need to know how the whole feature works. I'm just creating a provocation to test a specific assumption. I can probably do that in an hour. If I have access to unmoderated testing, an unmoderated testing tool, I can get data back in a day. And because I'm not testing a giant solution, My videos from that unmoderated testing platform are 3 minutes long, not 15 to 20 minutes long, right? I can rapidly test an assumption and start to collect data. Second way I can test an assumption is I can launch a one-question survey. This is becoming a more popular technique. You've probably seen it, where literally while you're using the product, there's a little pop-up that asks you a single question. The key to doing this well, there's two of them. Put it somewhere where you already have your customer's attention, where it doesn't interrupt their workflow. So you're not linking out to a survey. It's something that's very easy for them to just engage with. That's what allows you to get rapid responses. And you have to ask a reliable question. So this is just like interviewing. I'm not going to ask, do you watch sports? That's very ambiguous. If you watched a sporting event 5 years ago, you might say yes. I want to ask about a specific instance in the past. So in this case, I'm saying, did you watch a sporting event in the past week? If I'm looking at integrating Premier League games, I want to get more specific. Did you watch a Premier League game on TV in the past week? I can rapidly collect this data in an hour or two, or a day or two at most, depending on your traffic. Third way I can test this assumption, I can ask, are my customers already exhibiting behavior that would suggest this assumption is true? What might that look like? If we're Netflix, maybe some of our customers are already searching for sporting events. So I can go look at our search query logs and look for, are they already searching for sporting events? I can do this in an hour or two. I can do it very quickly. What did we get? Prototyping a specific moment, not the whole idea. One-question surveys, looking at behavioral analytics, 3 rapid ways to test the same assumption. I will share, for the vast majority of assumptions that you surface, one of these 3 methods is going to help you collect rapid feedback. There's one assumption. Our feasibility is our one exception. Our feasibility assumptions often need engineers to do some work. This is where we want to set a research spike. But we're not going to say to our engineers, go research what it would take to implement this. That's the same as testing the whole idea. We want them to test a very specific feasibility assumption. I'll give you an example. Maybe we're concerned that our local network can't give us a reliable enough feed. Can they give us accurate sports titles, accurate descriptions, an image to show? Does it fit? Does the data they give us fit in the interface space that we have? That's a feasibility assumption. So we would tell our engineers, spend a day or two, time box it, pull the last 25 events, try to display them. What percentage of them work? Can we display them in an interface? You give them a time box, you ask them to come back with the answer to a specific question. So we're starting to vet the feasibility risk before we build the solution. Here's what I'm going to share. The vast majority of teams that I work with, they're able to rapidly test assumptions using simple prototypes, not full-blown solution prototypes, one-question surveys, existing analytic behavior data. It's not just analytics. It could be support tickets. It could be what you're hearing from your sales team. Are your customers exhibiting the behavior that suggests this assumption is true? And research spikes. When we do this, we can start our week on Monday with 3 solutions and end our week on Friday with some compare and contrast data, starting to look for a front runner. Okay, we just covered a lot of ground. I'm going to review it really quickly. We started with the outcome, setting a good outcome at the top of the tree, balancing business value and customer value. We started our weekly cadence of engaging with customers, where we're interviewing to discover opportunities. We're choosing a target opportunity, working with sets of solutions. And in order to get that compare and contrast data, we're breaking them down into their underlying assumptions so that we can rapidly collect that compare and contrast data. I know this was a lot. A lot of people leave this talk feeling overwhelmed. Everything I talked about is covered in the book. I launched this book in the middle of May. It's called Continuous Discovery Habits. I designed it for a product trio, product managers, designers, and software engineers, to learn how to put this framework into practice. One of the things that I'm most proud of about this book and the feedback it's gotten so far is someone wrote an Amazon review where they said, Most books are an advertisement for the workshop. This book is the workshop. My goal was to give you an actionable book that you can put into practice tomorrow. So if you're interested in learning how to work this way, I strongly recommend picking up a copy. It's available at Amazon and other retailers around the world. All right, should we turn to questions?
Sure. Yep. Amazing. Thank you. Can we have a round of applause, please? There's so much good stuff in there to unpick. Yeah, thanks, Teresa. That's excellent. That was, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of stuff in there, but I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Continuous discovery. Once you get into the habit of it, which I don't think anybody is quite there yet, but I think it's like a snowball, right? It feels like it's a snowball that it goes on and on. It picks up momentum as you go on. We do have a few questions, which I believe Matt is going to do, but I've actually got one for you, if that's okay. Should we stop sharing the screen? How can we? Oh, it's on your screen.
Yeah, just a quick nudge to for anyone that hasn't submitted a question. Obviously, if you can just drop anything you want to ask Teresa in the chat now, and I'll make sure we get through a few of those. Chris.
Cool. Yeah. So one of the ones I've got, Teresa, is one of the things that we work in a really technical environment here at Redgate, and one of the things is that there's internal experts, let's say, and who are very sure because they've got historic experience about things. And it's like trying to get over that hump of we need to uncover what the customer is, what the customer's needs are, sort of use it as and I wonder how one of the interesting things you kept saying was test your assumptions. Mm-hmm. I think some people have the attitude of I'm going to validate my assumptions that I'm right. And it's like, how do you break that initial thing to open them up to that? That's one of the things that's on my mind at the moment.
Yeah, so I think story mapping can really help. So we often have stakeholders come to us. They'll say, build this thing. We've done it in the past. We're positive we're right. Here's what's happening in that moment. That stakeholder has a really vague idea of what that solution is. They have not fully thought it through. They're not a product manager. They haven't written the requirements, right? Just story mapping with them will help them expose gaps. Oftentimes when we story map an idea, the end of the story mapping exercise is we should not build this, right? It starts to expose this isn't going to work the way that we thought it would do. So first of all, that's an amazing activity just to do with your stakeholders. If at the end of story mapping, they still love their idea, that's fine. Use your story map to generate assumptions with them. They might say, why? Everything's fine. Of course, customers will do that. That's okay. Treat generating assumptions like a brainstorming exercise. It's generative. You can even tell your stakeholder, the vast majority of our assumptions are true. We're generating as many as we can so that we increase the likelihood that we uncover the risky ones, right? And then you assumption map to figure out the risky ones. We didn't talk about that. It's in the book. It comes from David Bland. It's an amazing exercise. And then from there, they might even say, like, I have past experience. There's tons of strong evidence for this assumption. Great. At least you had a conversation about it. Let's say you build the idea. It doesn't have the impact you thought. You've now laid the groundwork to help your stakeholders see, maybe we have an assumption that wasn't true. And if you can measure that impact and you can do that work, you can help uncover those blind spots. So for your first few rounds, you might still have to build things that you're still skeptical of, but you're laying the foundation for let's expose this gap in the future. But honestly, even story mapping and generating assumptions, even if you don't test any of them, you're still going to help your stakeholders see, hey, maybe my idea isn't as shiny as I thought it was.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
So two questions. They're quite similar, actually. And I think they're possibly in the same ballpark as Chris's question, but we'll see. So there was any tips on how we can help teams not start with solutions? And again, something similar about teams that are very project or output focused. So how do we kind of shift the thinking towards outcomes a bit more?
Yeah, so humans generally are very output focused. That's just how our brains are wired. We hear about a problem, we want to solve it, right? You've probably had this experience in your social life where somebody important to you tells you about a problem they're experiencing, you jump in to solve it and they get frustrated with you. They don't want a solution, they want empathy, right? Human brains are wired to jump to solutions. So the first thing is just building your awareness of that, both in yourself and in your coworkers, and to know when to push back. So it's not always the right thing to say, hey, we're jumping to solutions, let's uncover the opportunity, a lot of times you're just going to frustrate people by that, right? So if people are stuck in solution land, focus on story mapping, focus on surfacing assumptions. When you run into a challenge, you found an assumption that blows up the solution. Now you have an opportunity to say, hey, why were we building this? What was the opportunity? What was the problem we were trying to solve? Maybe there's another way to solve it. So if you're really rooted in solution land, sometimes you don't want to bring up outcomes and opportunities right away. You have to meet people where they are. You have to help them first see there's might be a challenge with this solution, and then work bottoms up. You ran into a problem. What else might we consider? And that's when you can start to introduce what problem are we solving. If people are more receptive to it and they just struggle with jumping, they struggle with staying in the opportunity space, then you can introduce, or like you're using OKRs, you can introduce outcomes, you can start talking about opportunities, and you're just going to have to remind people it really does take practice and you have to build that muscle.
Thank you. And then there's one from Andy. Lots of this reminded me of design thinking. Does it fit alongside it, or do you think design thinking has flaws? PS, thank you so much for an awesome talk.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different tools and frameworks. So I could replace design thinking in that question with jobs to be done, or contextual inquiry, or observations, right? Like we have so many ways about learning about our customers. Here was my goal with the opportunity solution tree. My goal was to find the common underlying structure for how product teams should work. So if we take something like design thinking, what do we get with design thinking? A lot of design thinkers will tell you to get out and observe your customers as a way to discover opportunities. They don't use that language, right? They talk about building empathy. But what do we get with empathy? We uncover needs, pain points, and desires, which I call opportunities. What do we get with jobs to be done? We do interviews. We hear about jobs. What are jobs? Customers trying to address needs, pain points, and desires, discovering opportunities, right? Ethnographic studies, diary studies, all these resources. What are we doing? We're trying to understand our customer's context. I recommend you synthesize that on an opportunity solution tree. So it's less about what's your favorite framework, what's your favorite tool, and it's more, I was trying to find what's the common structure. What I will say, the reason why I suggest interviewing to discover opportunities and not ethnographic studies, not observations, I'm not telling you not to do those things. If you can do those things, do them as frequently as you can. It's really hard to go observe a customer in person every week. So the reason why I recommend interviewing specifically is it's an activity that helps us uncover opportunities that is sustainable to do week over week. If you could also pepper in some of those other activities, they're great for helping you surface opportunities as well. They're less great for being continuous.
Thank you. Awesome. Question from Ju. When we used the opportunity tree and experimented with solutions, we actually choose the cheapest solution to start with without seeking assumptions, and it brought huge successes. What is the disadvantages of this approach?
I'm not sure I understood all of it, but let me reflect back what I heard. It sounds like you're choosing small solutions and then testing the solutions instead of the assumptions.
It sounds like how it's framed, yeah.
Okay. So sometimes people think about, oh, the way to find a continuous cadence is just to work on easy thing after easy thing after easy thing. And if the thing's easy enough, why don't I just build it and release it? Okay, here's the challenge. You built 30 easy things over the course of a quarter. All of them were easier to build than to do the discovery work, but they were all wrong things to build, right? So some people mistake agile and this continuous cadence as we're just going to do easy things. What's wrong with that? We don't build a moat. We're not differentiated from our competitors. We don't really solve customer problems because we just go after low-hanging fruit. The better way to look at it is find small opportunities. This is the advantage of the tree structure that we did not get into. If you map the opportunity space well, you take a big opportunity and you deconstruct it into smaller and smaller opportunities. it's not about a small opportunity being easy. It's a small piece of value you can deliver so that as you march across your tree, you're delivering value over time and tackling the harder opportunities. So I'll give you an example of this. You can imagine that Netflix has an evergreen opportunity of I can't find something to watch. That's a big, hard opportunity they're going to work on indefinitely for as long as they exist. We might break that down into sub opportunities. Maybe some people are trying to evaluate, is this show good? That's a sub opportunity. We may have somebody else who's trying to find a specific movie. I can't find this specific movie. That's a sub opportunity if I can't find something to watch, right? We can then break the first one, is this show any good, into even smaller opportunities. Maybe some people evaluate if a show is good based on who's in it. So who's in this show might be an even smaller opportunity. As we're working on our way down the tree, we're getting to smaller pieces of work. This is a key piece of the agile mindset where we can start to find value we can deliver over time. Like we can find a small opportunity we could deliver in a week or two, right? It's not necessarily that it's just an easy thing to do where we're just chipping away at easy things. It's that it's small enough that we can solve it in a short period of time. And doing so partially solves the parent, which is the meatier, harder opportunity. And then if we do this over a quarter, we start to look at meaningful solutions for some of those harder and harder opportunities. So if you map the opportunity space well, which we only barely touched on today, but I go into much more detail in the book, it helps you unlock this continuous cadence where you can ship value week over week and still solve hard problems and build a moat.
Awesome. Thank you. Chris, that about time for questions? You got time for one more?
Yeah, I think so. We've got one. Has anybody got one last one?
There is one last one in the chat. Hopefully it's
Let's do it.
One.
Go for it.
I also feel obligated to read it out because it's quite sweet. A student of mine is in the chat but afraid to ask the question. So how can we use this in our projects that don't have active stakeholders? So I guess in a non kind of commercial context, can we use some of your teachings today?
Yeah, so I'll share that I use this framework in literally every decision, like in every important decision that I make in my life. Like I apply it broader than just product. So when I was trying to decide where to live, I actually compared and contrasted and spent time in 4 different cities and enumerated my assumptions and started to test my assumptions. So here's what I tell everybody. People ask, like, do I have to do discovery on everything? No. There will always be times where you hear something that's like so obvious. The label on this button is not working for your customers, fix it, right? If it takes less time to build the solution than it does to do the discovery work, you can just build it. However, like I said, you could build 30 things that were all easier to do than the discovery and end up with a whole quarter of the wrong things to build. So what I would recommend is err on the side of doing more discovery than you think when you're getting started. And the more you're explicit about your assumptions and you assumption test and you map out the opportunity space, and the more you start to understand your hit rate, what was successful and what wasn't, you'll hone your intuition for when you need to do discovery and when you don't. And you'll start to see your blind spots and you'll be better at judging, can we just build this or do we need to remove some risk? And that's the thing to consider. Discovery is about removing risk and making better bets. So the first thing you have to do is measure the impact of your bets. Did you win or not, right? How successful was this bet? So make sure you're measuring the impact of everything that you release. And also make sure that you're writing down your assumptions. What impact do we expect this to have? And was there a gap? And when there's a gap, you want to look for how could you expose that gap earlier? And that will really help you hone your intuition around your blind spots and where you need to be doing more discovery.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I think we'll leave it there because we're now ticking over time. But thanks so much. Another round of applause for Teresa, please, everybody. That's awesome stuff. Inject it into my veins. That's what I need to hear. That's what I need to go preach tomorrow. Excellent. We have got some other just final slides quickly, which I'll probably mess up putting them on. So I'll just say it because that'll be quicker. I'm looking at the opportunity tree, and it's quicker for me to say things than it is for me to try and get slides to work. Yeah, thanks again to Teresa for that, and thanks to everybody for coming along. I hope it was interesting for you all. We do share a whole bunch of other stuff as well as part of the Ingeniously Simple brand. So there's blogs on our Medium post, we're on Twitter, we've got a podcast on Spotify and other places like that. So there's a wealth of information and sharing things, ideas, knowledge and things like that, like I mentioned. We are also always looking for speakers. So as I mentioned at the top of the thing, anybody from whether you're an expert in your field or whether you're a first-time speaker, we're particularly keen on giving first-time speakers a friendly environment to start with, and people from underrepresented communities. So just message us on the meetup page or get in touch with us via the UX Redgate Twitter, and we can sort something out. So we're very passionate about that. But yeah, other than that, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks again, Teresa, for that. Thanks for all the questions and the engagement, everybody. Really appreciate that. And keep an eye out for the next one. I think it will be like in about a month. We're like, as I said, we're rolling them and doing that. And hope you all have a great rest of your evening. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Teresa.